Welcome back to the Freightwaves FreightTech Venture Summit. I'm here with Kevin Diestel from Sapphire Ventures. Kevin, welcome to the party.
No, thanks for having me. I'm a huge fan of the Freightwaves platform and what you guys are doing for the industry, so feel honored to be part of this.
Yeah, I would love to tell our listeners and viewers a little bit more about Sapphire. You guys spun out of S&P a long time ago. That kind of may know a little about you in that way. But tell us more about kind of what you guys do as an investor and kind of what you provide.
Yeah, for sure. So we're an expansionary growth stage venture capital fund. We invest across the tech spectrum from enterprise software all the way to consumer and everything in between. We manage over $4 billion in AUM and have had some really good success. So we've had over 20 IPOs and 35 plus M&A exits, and so continuing to try to put points on the board. We generally, as I mentioned, get involved when companies have some momentum and traction, so we're writing checks in the $10 to $100 million range. And then in terms of what do we bring to the table? It's not just capital. We actually have invested very heavily behind what we call our portfolio growth team, and that's a 15-person team that focuses exclusively on behalf of our portfolio to introduce people to customers, go-to-market partnerships, executive level recruiting, putting on events, global expansion, et cetera, et cetera. So we like to think of ourselves as more than just capital.
Yeah, when I was doing research for our conversation, I was really struck by the fact that you and I have actually had a lot of career overlap in our past. What was it? I was at Namely, and you guys are invested in Culture Amp, so we got the HRTech space covered. I was at Plated, you guys are invested in Sunbasket, so we got the meal tech space covered, and then you guys are in Project 44 here in the freight tech industry now. So it's funny, we keep following each other around.
That's true, it's true. You and I have a lot of overlap in these industries.
Well, I mean, we're obviously here to talk a little bit about your experience in the freight tech industry. Do you want to talk a little bit about, how that's evolved and how your experience with P44 has gone?
Yeah, for sure. Freight tech has definitely seen an evolution, just like any other industry. And this isn't meant to be like a ding towards the space, but freight has always evolved a little bit more slowly than some of the other industries, at least to date, from a tech adoption perspective. And some of that is just definitionally, you're moving one physical item to another place. It's not ones and zeros in a computer, but that's changing. And so we're seeing a maturation across this enormous multi-trillion-dollar space, and we're seeing it on a daily basis. So we meet with startups daily, weekly, who are revolutionizing what we're seeing in the space. With Project 44, there's certainly a great example of that, where we're taking huge sums of data and helping glean insights and power actions for our constituents. They take a Switzerland approach, and so it's really just the pipes to provide data to various stakeholders within the industry. But it's always fascinating in freight in general, because it's generally a little bit more transactional, a little heavier on the services and labor side. There's a manual component to it, but we're now seeing a lot of this evolution, and we're excited about it.
Yeah, as I'm pretty new to this space too. I've been in it for just about a year, but as it's evolved, even kind of in the COVID times, it's been really interesting. One of the things that is a little different from kind of our past experiences is really, freight tech is just a vertical industry, right? There's different technology opportunities all up and down the spectrum, whether you're moving freight all the way down to visibility platforms to service providers there. And that's different, right, than something like Culture Amp, which you guys invested in, that serves an HR platform for a company across all different types of industries. Do you want to talk a little bit about the difference about kind of what it's like to serve a freight tech industry versus something like HR tech or whatever else, because there's obviously a ton of options out there.
No, you used two good examples. Like Project 44 certainly focused on freight more broadly, and then Culture Amp could be horizontal in nature and apply to almost any organization. At Sapphire, we spend time across both vertical and horizontal solutions. There's no real right way to think about the selling motion. In vertical software, you're generally, you really want to be like a true expert in the space. You want to understand the various constituents from top to bottom. Where does one solution start? Where does the other one stop? Who are the buyers of each application? And you certainly see a number of different revenue streams and revenue types. In horizontal, you're looking for a more broadly applicable solution. It spans industries. You're generally targeting the same buyer or champion. It's usually a department that you're looking at. You mentioned culture amp, even namely where you were before. Payroll, employee engagement is ubiquitous across industries, and so there's definitely a value to having, being able to get a pulse for your employees or get them paid in any industry. In the end, there are great opportunities across both. Vertical may be perceived sometimes as having a little bit more of a limited opportunity from like a TAM perspective, but look, there are monster spaces and you can capture real market share in those. And so we're certainly investing behind a number of horizontal solutions and vertical solutions. There's no right answer or wrong answer there.
Yeah, I mean, we talk a lot about the $9.6 trillion space that freight is globally. You can't really get much bigger of a vertical market than that one, can you?
Yeah, no, it does. There are very few that get larger than that, which is, again, the basis of our thesis in freight tech more broadly is really exactly what you just said, multi-trillion dollars, and it's really ripe for disruption from a technology standpoint.
So when you're serving a vertical industry, obviously there's a ton of different revenue opportunities that you can go after. It really should fit your business model clearly, but you've got everything in this in freight tech from the traditional, or what I can think of traditional as like a SaaS model, all the way down to a marketplace model where you're taking a GMV slice, and additionally you've got even some interesting stuff like hardware supported SaaS as well. Can you talk a little bit about how you see all those different types of revenue streams, and kind of like what type of perspective you have as an investor based on those business models that exist?
Yeah, for sure. There are like freight is a great example of where you can get a whole slew of various revenue types and revenue streams, and then how we think about it is more around the quality of that revenue. So what is the value of that revenue stream? And they can vary. So they can be unique. Everyone is valued differently. You mentioned SaaS, subscription. There's transactional revenue. There's recurring versus reoccurring, where people keep coming back, but it may not be contractually recurring. There's marketplace and take rate that you'd see in more of the freight forwarders, professional services, hardware versus software. So Bill Gurley at Benchmark wrote a blog about not all revenue is the same. And I thought that's a great starting point for anyone who wants to take a look into this. But a couple of examples, right? And we've touched upon these briefly, but marketplace or freight forwarders, they're really like a GMV type of revenue stream. They take a take rate. So it's usually, you'd want to look at more of like a net revenue, but it's transactional in nature, can often be reoccurring, and you can see the similar expansion over time of their customer base. But you can see some real explosiveness there. Subscription, annual, generally paid up front, can be tiered on modules and products, or based on volume. Generally seen as the highest quality, I would say, revenue, because it is contractual, it is recurring. People are generally renewing them. Those renewal rates can vary between SMBs and enterprises, so there's a whole slew of things to uncover there. There's professional services. Depending on the market segment, you may need more of those. So as you move up market into enterprise, your customers are going to want a little bit more of the white glove, a little bit more hand-holding in that respect. And those generally come with lower margins in most cases. And so it's just a different, again, quality of revenue. We try to guide companies to, if you're going to offer professional services, try to at least aim for break even, if not making some money on it. But in many cases, at the beginnings, people are losing some. And then, yeah, we could go into detail on others like hardware, software. someone like a Samsara, where there's an actual device and then they build software on top of it. So there's a whole slew of them. In terms of the quality, I think of it as like, what is the margin profile behind those? Is there implementation on professional services? Hardware generally has a lower margin, so there's different elements of that. And so when I think of valuing them, like if I had to dumb it down, you may see like a GMV multiple maybe closer to like 1x, whereas a SaaS recurring revenue stream might command a 10, 15 plus type X revenue from valuation. And so it really is it's a spectrum.
Yeah, I think you really touched on that valuation point at the end there, where you see like those GMV-based businesses kind of at like that 1x. It's interesting. I've always kind of thought like the hardware-supported SaaS businesses and the implementation-heavy SaaS businesses all kind of play in that same like business model framework, right? You want to break even on either the hardware or the implementation, but what I look for when I'm managing our business is really to get that recurring or the customer relationship and have that be how our business and then in turn our investors' situation really align to that, so that we're all aligned in that regard to the positive outcomes.
Yeah, for sure. And I think people are shifting that direction. We also saw that like if you can get into the payment stream or the actual transaction stream, your customer is let's say it's an e-commerce company, and as they grow, you can participate in that growth, even in a non-subscription type of model. And so it really, I don't want to swing too far one way or another on which revenue streams are better. I just think they come with, there's a bunch of elements that are underlying those in terms of the quality, again, and the valuation of that revenue. I mentioned margins, but there's also metrics like the efficiency. So people commonly refer to magic number or payback periods. We look at net dollar retention. So is that cohort of customers expanding over time, which is kind of the metric du jour these days, because it shows that there is stickiness, but also expansion to the revenue base. TAM, for sure, like total addressable market, is a huge element of that. So not every $100 million revenue business is the same. And then team, for sure, is a major factor there.
Yeah. So we've touched a ton of different areas within this industry and even expanding outside of it. But what really gets Sapphire excited about new investments?
Yeah, look, we look for big spaces, great teams to execute behind them, and every one of our investments across the spectrum, from hardcore infrastructure to consumer, is really based on data. And that data, it's not just having the data, it's gleaning the insights from the data, it's creating actions behind that data. I think Freightwaves with the Sonar platform is like a great example of a company that has done that. It's really about what are the key elements that we can figure out from this data. There's also being the pipe to data. We mentioned Project 44, but they take a Switzerland approach to visibility as one module of selling the picks and shovels to folks across the shipping logistics industry. Any way you can build a moat is going to be super helpful. That can be on the technology side, but also liquidity is a big moat as well. And what immediately pops to mind for me are the marketplaces and the digital brokerages, where you are acquiring both supply side and demand side, and that's really difficult to do. But if you do it right, you can have mega success. Other examples on the marketplace side would be like an Uber or an Airbnb, someone like that. So you have folks like the Convoys or Transfixes or Senders in Europe, where they're aggregating both supply and demand to create that liquidity in order to then create a better experience for all constituents in the ecosystem. A couple other areas we've been spending time are just like on demand, and that can be a couple different elements there, where we've been spending time in the warehouse management system side, where you can spin up and spin down warehouse capacity just like you would with an AWS server. So there's folks like Flex and Flow Space and Deliverer and ShipBob and people like that who are helping create that ability to be more flexible to their customers, both from SMBs all the way up to large enterprises. Certainly with, this is nothing new, but I think COVID has been a big accelerant to this, but it's like last mile delivery. Now people, whether it's bringing food or having a package delivered, folks like Bring are trying to aggregate a more holistic view across different sources of that delivery model. Airspace is looking at time critical solutions to bring, it could be organs or a piece of a Boeing plane or something like that to a factory. So there's a whole slew of things we look at, but I will say that it really comes down to data that underlines all of our theses.
Yeah, and there's so much opportunity for data within our sector, Freight Tech. So Kevin, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. Everyone, stay tuned. We have another great Fireside chat coming up next.